Apologies that I just started recording. While still in secondary school, I'm amazed at that, he became involved in the movement for the defense of human and civil rights in Poland. In 1981, he was a student, and when martial law was declared, he managed to avoid arrest by going into hiding for almost 9 months, staying in 24 different places. And the reason he had to do that was because of his history of organizing protest, and the government were looking for people like him. He has worked as a journalist, magazine editor. He was the deputy mayor of Lublin and more recently, professor of economics. In the late 1980s, he worked on the earliest privatization plans for Poland at the Institute of Economics. And in 2007, he was awarded the Officer's Cross of the Order of Polonia Restituta by the President of the Republic of Poland, recognizing his activity in defense of human and citizen rights under the communist regime. Well, I stand amazed at these people and incredibly pleased that they asked Pale Well Press to be involved. So Secret Love Letters Poland, there is a copy with a wonderful front cover by Agnieszka Herman. It's a memoir in prose and poetry of their experiences during the period of martial law in the 1980s. As I said, they were lovers and they were members of the student body, but because they were both actively involved in resistance movements, they had to be very careful about what they did. Thomas was in hiding, and so they had to communicate secretly. And their friend Piotr Rogoyski offered to carry letters between them. And these are some of the letters he carried. And a wonderful essay on what it was like to be a courier between these two people. And some letters and some essays and Anna's poems. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful pamphlet and full of a great deal of spiritual importance for me. I have Polish family, some of whom disappeared during the Second World War, and I feel very strongly about it. Anyway, thank you for listening to the introduction. And I would now like to hand over to Anna and Tomasz. And if the rest of you could keep yourselves on mute, it would be very helpful. Fantastic. Tomasz, Anna?
There is a question from Maria, or am I wrong? No, it's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would first like to say that I was never an ambitious person. Things happened to me, and the book is not a different story. I mean, it was really Anya's idea and her persistence to have this book published. And as you will see, most of the material in the book is actually by Anna. And then thanks to David Clark and especially to Camilla, this project was realized. But we agreed I will talk first, but I'm emphasizing this because, as you will see in the book, I'm playing a kind of secondary role in the book. My intention was, I would try not to talk for too long, but my intention was, I was thinking how to convey something from those times, and then I came to the conclusion to give you a few snapshots before the time that the book is about, just to recover an impression of what kind of country it was, what kind of conditions we encountered. And because we are from the same generation, we were born the same year with Anna, our first encounter with politics was actually precisely the same. And in my case, it was that my uncle didn't come home from the Warsaw University. He came back home only 2 days after because he was released by the police. And precisely in Anna's case, in Lublin, I was in Warsaw and I was in Lublin, and I was 7 years old, Anna was 7 years old. Her uncle was also involved in some student protests in 1968. And also that image of those protests was the first early experience for us as children that something is not quite right basically around where we live.
That's correct. May I add something? Because in that time, when I was 7, I was really worried about my father, because my father lost his job in that time because of he was expressing his political opinion in his job, and he lost his job, and only my mother was able to work, and that was very difficult situation for my family in that time. For 1 year, he hasn't any job. My father wasn't able to get any job. They call it bilet wilczy, which is will be translated
Wolf ticket.
Wolf ticket. He got a wolf ticket. That means he wouldn't be able to get any job because of his opinion, political opinion. As a child, I was watching the situation at home, and I was very mature in that time. Very early, I was able to understand the politics very early.
So my next experience, I'm not going through all of this because you will be bored to death, but my next experience was 1 year later, exactly, well, 1 year and no, half a year later, in September, because we are talking about March 1968. I came back to school in September, and I discovered that my best colleague at the time, I was sitting next to him, a very lively chap, was not there. It turned out basically that he was one of the people who were forced to go abroad because he was of Jewish origin, and at that time the communists were so desperate that they engaged in anti-Semitic campaign, precisely as a result trying to hit the student protests. So I lost my best friend due to communists, which didn't make me like them. And he basically later on, he sent us some letters to our class at school from US, and we were very surprised because there were a lot of black children on the pictures he sent, and we didn't have any black children at the time. So that was 68. Then about 2 years later, again, that would be joined for me and Anna. I remember my family and everybody around celebrating the fall of the first secretary of the Communist Party, who was the guy who crashed the student protests. And then in December 1970, he started shooting workers. But shooting workers is not a pleasant sport, even for the Communist Party. They sometimes do it, but they changed tack, and basically the guy was out after about 1 month later, and everybody was very happy. And that is an introduction because that brings us to 1970s, the whole decade, where the Communist Party, that was time, relatively liberal time. The legitimacy of the Communist Party was mostly because the country was growing relatively fast. It was a time of progress. 1970s was a good time in Poland. Nobody knew that they borrowed a lot of money, which turned out only later when it all collapsed. And so I would say that that was the time when we were both in secondary school. And I would say the idea of opposing the communists was not very dominant idea in mid-1970s. From that time, I remember, for example, when I was waiting for a bus, which was late somewhere in the center of Warsaw, I had to change buses, and there was a big festival going on, organized by the party, a lot of people having fun, and they were simply not like myself. There were not many people who thought at that time about any form of protest, but there were, in my school around me, there were quite a few of people like this, so I didn't feel alone, but we simply didn't really connect with that. I mean, people didn't really think about it. So, and the repressions were not really that serious at that time. So it was more a question of imagination than a question of courage. And it was a lot of fun as well. Being independent, doing something that is not prescribed by the authorities, having a luxury of of simply living your own life without complying with whatever is expected was joy. So that was not set time for us at all. And then in 1980, there were strikes again because the economic situation deteriorated. And this time the strikes were all across the country. So the idea of shooting to workers with live ammunition was more difficult to implement. And then they started to sit down, they started to negotiating with, which led to the Solidar Union. And that came at that time, which is August 1980, started what we call a period of carnival, because for about 16 months, the communists were really not quite in control of the country. Basically, the Solidarity was such a massive movement. There were so many people involved that they were simply not on top. There were some repressions, but they were really limited and they just couldn't cope. So that was the time. We were both students at that time, and this is how we met with Anna. We were both involved in one place where we met specifically was a student movement. There were a few people who were still in jail, and as a matter of principle, the communists didn't want to release them just to demonstrate that they still can arrest somebody, but we are talking about few people, and we were involved in both in the student movement for defense of political prisoners, and this is how we met. But as it turned out, they didn't give up. They were secretly planning the counterattack, and that happened in December 1981. Solidarity knew about that things like this may happen, but Solidarity was still surprised when it happened exactly, and overestimated the power of strikes, because at the time they were decided to shoot, but they had police going around the country and crashing the strikes. So the idea of staying in factories, it was both weakness and strength, because Solidarity was non-violence movement. So basically it organized strikes, but in December 1981, it didn't help. And of course, it didn't help either that they arrested several thousand people one day before they actually officially declared martial law. They made arrests in the evening, they declared martial law the next day in the morning. So I was lucky because simply I went home to Warsaw. I was studying in Lublin. They came to, one other thing about communists at the time is that they were pretty disorganized. So the first group came to arrest, as I learned later, the first group came to arrest myself, but didn't find me. And they found my colleague with whom I was renting some room and his girlfriend. And then they assumed that they are not interested in him. But that was a mistake, because they came for another group came to arrested him about 20 minutes later. So this is just an example of how disorganized they were. But I was were in Warsaw, and the interesting thing was that next day the main newspaper had a list of 53 people, I think, which was an official list of people who were arrested. In fact, there were several thousand, but they listed 50 few people. And to this day, I don't know why they put my friend's name on this list. So once I saw his name, I realized that must be after me as well. That was very clear. So I knew that I have to do something about it. The only suspicion I have why they choose him was because he has a foreign sounding name. And they when you look at the list they published, they were trying to again demonstrate that Polish opposition consists of basically people of some who are ethnically alien, you know, again, German, Jewish, or whoever was on the imagination. But that, so I went into hiding. I didn't go to Lublin because I was well known in Lublin, while I was not really known in Warsaw. So I stayed in Warsaw and did various things. I remember, for example, a situation where I had a bag full of leaflets, underground leaflets, and then it was shortly after the martial law, and I was taking, with a colleague of mine, we were taking train back to Warsaw from somewhere outside Warsaw, and we didn't know that yet, that they basically, by that time, they organize groups of soldiers to go through trains, and it's a difficult situation because you are between stations and there's not much you can do. And I remember a soldier, a young guy who was probably drafted to take part in it, who looked at my documents, he checked my names, and basically told me good luck and went away. So things like this happen. So either they were inefficient, or also that there were a lot of people, there were not many fanatics on the side of the government at that time. And that helped a lot, because they were simply inefficient, both because the communist system was inefficient and because there were many people who really did not, they were forced to do things, but they didn't want to do those things. But that's just an example. And I established contact with Anna. And in fact, Anna came to Warsaw, which required at that time a special permission. Her excuse was that she has to visit her auntie, who was ill, which was not true. And we planned to meet at the New Year's Eve, about 3 weeks after the martial law. But because, again, there were some phones, but we couldn't rely on phones that much. And there was also conspiracy. In fact, Anna didn't find me on the New Year's Day, so I spent it in a different place, and we met 1 or 2 days after the New Year's Eve. But I'm just giving this as an example of what conspiracy was. You simply couldn't find people immediately. And then I hesitate what else I shall tell you, or what else would be interesting.
We should tell something about everyday life, how it was during the martial law in Poland. That was a very difficult life, because nobody expected that it would be such a difficult life in Poland in that time. Because there was one day you wake up and there's no telephone, there is no buses, you couldn't use your car. You don't need to, you have to walk to your work. There is no shops full of food, empty shops, just empty shelves. And restrictions were everywhere. So there was, when I woke up in the morning, TV was on TV, there was only General Jaruzelski talking about the rules, strict rules in Poland, about the martial law. And my first impression was what's happened with Tomasz, where he is now. And of course, there was no telephone, there was no internet in that time, of course. So the first time I tried to contact the place where he used to live, but he was not there. So for many weeks, I have no idea where he was, what's happened to him, was he arrested or not? It was very stressful time, really very, very, very difficult time. And then what's happened? Piotr Rogoyski, the one who wrote this fantastic essay for the book, he contacted me. He came to me from Warsaw with the first secret letter from Tomasz. That is what is the book about those letters. He was the secret courier who was exchanging the letters between me and Tomasz, secretly as well, because there was a censorship on the letters as well. So sending letter wasn't easy as well, because they were checking each letter. And Tomasz was in hide, so from his perspective, it wasn't easy to send a letter from the post office. So that's what we had from that point of view. The secret courier was very important. So he traveled, Piotr Rogoyski traveled from Warsaw to Lublin and from Lublin to Warsaw, exchanging our letters. This is book about those letters. So we should say thank you to, he's not with us today, Piotr Rogoyski, but he's a character. He's a very interesting friend of us. He's a very special person. He's a bit eccentric, but he was very dedicated to those idea of being a friend of us for many years now. But we are very grateful to him for those letters, because when he came to me with the letter, I knew that Tomasz is alive, first of all, that he's doing well. And of course, I was in much better condition afterwards. That's what I wanted to add to what Tomasz was saying. And that's what this book about.
Yes. Yeah. For example, I may tell you what happened to my friend who was arrested on the evening I was not arrested. So, I mean, dealing with several thousand people, I think it was 7,000, I don't remember the number, it's difficult. So they had them in many places, some in prisons, some in tents, in like holiday resorts turned into prisons. They had to find a lot of space, but they were officially, families were informed where those people are, and I work out where he is. So, for example, I wrote a letter to him. It would be about January, which I didn't sign my own name, but I signed it in the way that he understood is myself. And then I asked a colleague of mine to post it in a different town where I wasn't, in Łódź, so that's not to give hints where I am. And he actually received the letter, as I talked to him later. And they were very happy to see, you know, I'm okay, and to see this letter. So you could play games with the regime. He was released in May because effectively they arrested so many people that they just couldn't cope. And so they started gradually releasing people. And we meet sometime after. So, but there was a large number of people in hiding, but it was not such a large number. I mean, I've seen, for example, a list with my name, which was given to the police officers, basically looking for people. So, and then the university started to negotiate in the autumn, started to negotiate conditions for us to come back. So we have some guarantees that we are not arrested straight. And that indeed happened. So I came back I lost 1 year of my study, but then I came back in the autumn of 1982, basically. So that was, but during that time, the risk was much higher, of course, than 1970s, because there was, after the martial law, there was a different law. And I simply was lucky on few occasions, because if I was arrested, then I would spend at that time few years in prison. I wouldn't. So it was because then. But the one interesting experience at that time was that there were a lot of people who were afraid, but there were also a lot of people who simply were annoyed by what the regime is doing, and a lot of people willing to help. And a lot of new people who were never involved in opposition offered help. And that was important because following contacts which would be known to the police was obviously not the best strategy. Sometimes we had to do it because there was no choice. And there were some near misses. But then a lot of people, so, and also even during the martial law, they were beating some people up. But I would say that, for example, comparing to what is going now in Belarus, the level of violence, well, I don't know. I mean, it was comparable. They killed, the count is they killed over 100 people. which may not be a large number compared to some, to General Pinochet, for example, but still it is a tangible number. And they were not, but Poland is a large country and there was a lot of people willing to help at that time. So they didn't quite crush the solidarity ever. The people were in hiding, some people were not in hiding, some people became, again, it succeeded in the short term, but in the long term, they didn't made it a success, and solidarity re-emerged. If we're talking 1982, then 1988, strike started again, and so 6 years after. So it has some effect, but they didn't quite succeed, basically.
That's fantastic to hear those things. It feels fresh, like it was yesterday. And I think it is really awful how in a country like England or maybe Germany or whatever, we might know these things are happening, but we don't understand the detail and they're distant from us. At least now, I think with the internet, it's possible to keep in touch and support people in different countries who are going through something similar in the way that the exiled writers supports people. And many of them come from different countries to live in the UK. But thank you both for sharing that. I really enjoyed putting this book together. Are we going to go on to now, Anna, do you think, you and Peter?
Yes, we will.
Would you like to introduce Peter? I would be most grateful.
Peter. Peter is a friend of mine, actually Tomasz as well. We met many years ago. Peter is a fantastic poet and actor as well, and a radio presenter. And we met because of poetry. And Peter is a leader of the Poetry Anonymous group from Croydon. And he used to be a presenter at Radio Croydon as well, the poetry program. Very fantastic, it was a fantastic program. And he's as well a member of my poetry theater group. The Polish name of this group is Wędrowny Salon Poetycki. We do present, he's a member and he's an actor as well. And we do present the poetry in Polish and in English in different places in London, as well in Poetry Cafe. And it happened once that Exile Writers Inc. invited us for the presentation of my poetry, but they asked us to do something very different, something about difficult times in Poland. And I can see Maria Jastrzębska is here as well. And Maria was invited as well with her presentation. She's a poet originally from Poland as well. And Maria was presented her poetry as well. And we presented with Peter and our friends as a group, as a poetry group, those letters. They were the first time presented in Poetry Cafe many years ago. And that was the first idea to do something about those letters, because they were just staying with us for 30 years. And the idea came from the Exile Writers Inc., from David Clark, who is with us today as well. He was the first who came with the idea of doing this event. And then I was talking to Maria Jastrzębska as well, that maybe it will be good to make a book one day. And it did happen. Thank you, Kamila, because you help us a lot. And the book is just fantastic. Thank you very much. So we will be reading with Peter today some of the letters and some of my poetry from those days, because I was always writing since I was very young. In that time in Poland, in those difficult days, it did help me to write poetry. Of course, I wasn't able to publish my poetry officially, but I was able to publish my poetry unofficially in that time in Poland. So I would like to as well welcome today our another poet, Steve Rushton from Poetry Anonymous Group, who is with us today. Hello, Steve. Hello. So we will be reading then, Peter, please.
Right, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Hannah. It's a pleasure to read for you here this evening. This is a translation of those letters that Piotr Rogoyski skillfully delivered between Warsaw and Lublin in the first 6 months of martial law. They're interwoven with poems written by Anna about that time. The first letter, Wednesday, 23rd of December, 1981, 5:30 p.m. Hi, thanks. It's nice to know you're there. I've written so little recently, mainly because I wasn't sure who could carry the letter. Besides, there are 5 to 6 people sleeping in one room. I do not have many chances to be alone. Generally speaking, these times are offering excellent opportunities to meet new people. But, well, this is not what I wanted to write. Most important, I am mainly interested in the fact that sooner or later we will see each other. I am not sure when that will be. Maybe one day we shall live normally, but it does not matter. What matters is that you are there. That is it for now, Tomek.
They were not the ones. They were not the ones who ordered the trees not to be silent, who gagged the spring birds. They stand in the glow of the rising sun, worrying about what will happen. Peter, over to you, please.
Sunday, 31st of January, 1982, 6:10 p.m. Hello. Nothing's constant in the world. Joy will intertwine with woe. Horace. This letter will be a bit different. Apologies in advance. I want you to know what I think and feel. I want that always. This sounds slightly phony, but that is the way it is. I've been through a lot this week. Now it is hard to come down to earth. I have discovered the meaning of these two feelings, love and hate. It cannot be by chance that they arrived at the same time. And this is exactly the phenomenon of homeostasis that biologists talk about. It seems it is only thanks to love that I could first bear and then overcome the hatred in me. Back to earth. I still cannot get back to myself. I have been moving around like a sleepwalker for 2 days already. The boys have their methods. We have cameras and television, and we can see more than you think. Close quote. Anya. Wednesday, 3rd of February 1982, 10:15 p.m. Tomek, I got on top of things, but only for a moment. First, I arranged to meet Piotr on Tuesday. He was supposed to come. He did not, neither on Tuesday nor Wednesday. Then I found out he went back to Warsaw on Tuesday night. I'm not sure what it means. Slightly strange, isn't it? Secondly, I saw Grasnia, and she gave me the letter. Now the worst. She said you have been in Lublin since Monday, and apparently somebody spoke to you. I do not know what to make of it. If things go on like this, I will have to arrange a trip to that sanatorium. Of course, I hope you would go with me. These last few days, I have only listened to American ballads. When you come, we will listen together. They are very soothing. I have noticed something strange. I keep writing and writing this letter, and I cannot finish it. It gives me so much joy. Oh, enough for today. It is getting late. Anya.
Hands. We walk alone, hand in hand. Hold out our hands. Give, take, take, give. Closed circuit of dubious mutual connections.
Sunday, 7th of February, 1982, 2:30 p.m. Hello. The manipulation continues. For instance, as regards information, somebody's intercepting it. I hope you might be able to explain our joint point of view to that person, as I have already run out of arguments. The result is, now the information only flows in one direction, yes, but at least there are rumours that you are alive. That is something at the end of the day. Apparently, these worms have accepted that you have the right to a private life. Yes. For the time being, we can lead a private life by correspondence. At some future date, we will go on holiday to Rio in Brazil. How about that? Well, if you do not want to, we do not have to. Never mind. I miss you very much. Yours, Tomek.
December the 13th. Defiantly taut lips. For how long? Steam drifts from forest ponds towards a faraway home. Smoke obscures the view. A crumbling world order cries out for help. The voice of the subversive faltered and fell. Its spirit-scented essence evaporated. Touched by the winds of history like an old woodrop. Yellow slips of paper under my fingers remind me of nothing. All I feel is the harsh cold of meaning. Another empire, topless just like that. Not even slips of paper anymore. Thank you very much.
Let me unmute myself. That was beautiful. It was very moving. I believe I would like to believe that this is how all humans will survive. But I know that sadly they don't always do so. And I am enormously encouraged that you were able to stay in touch through friendship and through the quiet non-compliance of people like that soldier on the train. I was in Croatia the other day, well, not 2 years ago now. And in Croatia, the government gave orders to the young soldiers to take their guns and shoot at their neighbors. And they refused, and they all ran away and hid in the countryside and didn't turn up to the barracks where they were supposed to be. And that's a very brave thing to do. And I like to think that there are more people who won't do terrible things just because the state have asked them to. Anyway, this has been marvelous listening to you. And now I would like everyone to unmute themselves and we will have a clap, and then we can perhaps also have some questions. If you wish to ask a question, it will be very helpful if you can do what is called a reaction, where you click the reaction button and it puts up a picture of a hand next to your face, and then I will be able to say, do you want to speak? But if that doesn't work, we will just chip in and talk anyway. So lovely. So I'm going to put this now into gallery view so I can see if anybody wishes to speak. So I am looking across at, is it Thor? The person who has the iPad. So is there anyone who would like to ask a question or make a speech or say anything? No? Okay. Well, I have some questions. Anna, did you feel when you were writing your letters, when you were writing your poems, that they were like letters? And did you share them with Tomasz at the time, or are they more private reflection, which you have only shared more recently?
When I was writing my letters, that was definitely only for Tomasz, for nobody else. For many years, it was too private, too emotional.
The question was about poetry.
Yes, I know, but poetry was a different story with poetry, because I was sharing with Tomasz my poetry, then I was sharing with my friends my poetry as well. And I didn't expect that someone would be interested in my poetry even. But then I find out that somebody would like to publish this poetry. So I was I didn't expect it. I thought that it would be just for myself and for Tomasz, like those letters, the poetry. And I understand that was the first time when somebody was just encouraged me to write poetry, the first time.
Mm.
It was interesting time for me for the whole of my life as well.
So I think we owe quite a bit to Peter in that case, and the
Yes.
encouragement that he gave you and gives to other people. This is not the first time I have had the pleasure of meeting Peter. He's helped several of my writers.
I mean,
But
no, it thanks to Peter actually. Then that Anna was first on UK radio in English, but the poetry Anna talks about, she did publish unofficially in mid-1980s already in Poland, in 1985. And that's what was remarkable about it. It was low circulation, but still, was that she signed that her own name, and at that time that was very risky and strictly prohibited. There were not many people doing it because, well, a lot of people were, were writing things, but they were not signing in their own name. So that was quite remarkable, actually.
do you think there is something which prepares a person to be independent? I mean, you mentioned your childhood experiences, but were your parents also encouraging you to stand up and be brave?
I don't think so. No, they were afraid of being us involved in the opposition. They were so frightened because after the war, they were just very quiet because of what they were. It was in a situation that they were trying to hide their own opinion as much as they could. Even they were trying to hide what we are coming from, our family roots. We didn't know exactly where we are coming from at home. There were not discussion about family roots, for example. Everything was secret. And the same situation with the political opinion. They tried to avoid political opinion, expressing their political opinion, because they're afraid that we might lose the jobs, for example.
There were also big differences, I think, in generations. And Ania's parents, they could do things themselves, as Ania's father, who lost his job for being independent, but it doesn't mean they will try to prevent their children doing the same thing. And also the oldest generation, the generation of our grandparents, they went through Stalin. So when the opposition started, public opposition started again in 1970s, they were convinced this may be a provocation, it will all finish with everybody get arrested and so on, because this was their experience. So it's not that they like regime, but they were against that. But the younger generation was different. So, like, for example, I mentioned my uncle who was arrested in 1968, and in my own development, he played an important role because he was always very independent and lived his own life and enjoyed that. He actually finally got to jail in 1980s. After the martial law, because unfortunately partly because of me, because I was hiding in his place or around that area outside Warsaw, and they organized. I was part of it, but then I left to Lublin. They had a pretty well organized publishing place, and finally, after 2 years, they were discovered, and my uncle spent about 3 years in jail. With 5 children waiting for him.
Horrible. Now we have some questions. David, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, it's more of a comment than a question, really. But so I was there and I was hosting that evening at the ex-writers in Poetry Cafe, where her letters were read out and performed. And at that stage, it was very moving, but I had little understanding of the wider context in which it was all happening. And it's taken several years to for this project to develop and come to fruition. But what I really love about it is that the booklet actually provides a context in which to place these letters. Particularly, what is very specific and beautiful about it is the context of everyday life, not just the wider political context, it's there as well, but what it was like in everyday life for people to live under martial law. And that comes across also very beautifully in these accounts, as well as in the essay written by Piotr, their friend. So for me, it is a well-rounded booklet, at the heart of which are these love poems, but there is the context for it as well.
That's marvelous.
Yes, thank you. That's because of our friend courier, Piotr Rogoyski from Warsaw. He's excellent talent for the details, and he does remember everything perfectly well.
He was, by the way, he was one of the best conspirators I ever encountered, because he had this topographic memory, and this is one. It's very important because you avoid writing. I mean, a lot of problems resulted from people writing things, and he never did. He always remembered everything, and he, to this day, he has this kind of photographic memory of things that happened. I was impressed myself because I wouldn't remember many of the detail, and he has this incredible, unique photographic memory. And I mean, as David wrote in his introduction, he basically recorded every tiny detail, but it gives you the atmosphere of what was it.
Yes, it makes it feel very real.
He was never discovered, even if he did difficult things. He was a photographer, for example. He was documenting quite a lot of public demonstrations, events. He was passing some of his photographs to foreign press. None of that never had his name. There are some which are quite known of some remarkable events, which to this day nobody knows it was actually his.
Yeah.
Maria, I think you have a question. Do you want to unmute?
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
marvelous.
you. Thank you. Well, first of all, to echo what David said, and to thank you so much for this presentation. I was there in the Poetry Cafe some years ago, and I found the performance then very moving, and it's still just as moving to me today. It's just really touches my heart, and I think it's lovely that you've shared something so precious with us all, and it has made it so real. I think, Camille, you said that earlier, that it's like it was yesterday, and I just feel it's history come alive, and I think that's so important that is preserved. It's, you know, so I think you've done something amazing. I guess my question to you is, well, or one of the questions I could ask you is, you know, you've been through so much, and you've sort of, you know, you put so much of yourselves and your energy into making things change for the better. And I wonder how you feel about things now. You know, are you worried? Are you pessimistic or optimistic? Because, you know, things in Eastern and Central Europe aren't going well. You know, you mentioned anti-Semitism, which the communists used, and we've, you know, in the present times in Central and Eastern Europe, the governments are using it again. They're using, you know, targeting other minorities like the LGBT minority, and you know, there's kind of, we're on a road to more repression. And how does that make you feel, having been through what you guys went through and the courage that you showed?
The most annoying thing about it is hypocrisy, because they do all what you say, exactly what you say they do, and they try to hijack this tradition. This is why we really hesitate to try to publish it in Poland.
Yes.
Because I mean, they simply they try to hijack this tradition, and they do things which are directly contrary to to the spirit of solidarity, and they they claim this tradition. And this the hypocrisy of this is what makes me personally most annoyed. But I don't know. I'm a born optimist. They stumble. It's not smooth. It's not. You can. I mean, you know yourself. They meet resistance, and they go one step forward, one step back. They don't have a totalitarian machine this time, and what people think might become. I mean, the main problem is probably that so many people just underestimate what's going on, and a lot of young people, and they just don't care because they have options. They can go abroad. But yeah, I think it annoys me as much as you, and upsets me.
Yes, this is really upsetting what is going on in Poland at the moment. But it's very hard to predict what is going to happen, really. But that's what Tomasz was saying, that we had an idea what to do with those letters. Should we publish in Poland or should we publish in England? But in the end, we said that we definitely will be publishing in England, because if we are going to publish in Poland, we definitely will be attached to a certain political spectrum. It will be a kind of fight on which side we are, on the left or on the right. But definitely our hearts are always in the human rights. We are always in the human rights side, which is not in our idea, was never on the left, never on the right. It was somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. And
the idea of we needed a kind of space, emotional space. We needed emotional space. That's what I said for our letters. We didn't want any political fight around these letters. This is why maybe in 20 years' time, when the situation in Poland will change, we will publish in Polish as well.
Well, the letters belong everywhere.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's right.
But it's to be honest, it's not Poland, it's Belarus, which is suffering most now. Whatever happens in Poland, I think Poland will manage. At least I think it will. They will get rid of the current government sooner or later. The real source is Belarus at the moment.
Yeah. Are there any more people who wish to speak or to ask any questions? I know I have a question in the chat room. Julia has been trying to get hold of the book. But Julia, I didn't answer you before because I was in the middle of all this, but I'm sorry you're having difficulty getting the book. And anyone who wishes, if you have a look at the beginning of the chat, you will see there is a link in here. It links about the second or third item, and it shows exactly how to, if you use that link, you can get a book from my press, and it is at a small discount at the moment. But if you order it from Waterstones or Foils or Amazon, it should come, but it may not. Sometimes when an independent publisher has a book and has made it available, the big companies say, oh, we don't have a possibility of getting hold of it. So could you let everybody know if they wish the book and they can't find it anywhere else to order it from me? But it is available through Amazon, for example, if you go onto their website and you type in the details. But I'm sorry, Julia, you had trouble getting hold of it. And always happy to supply more copies if you can't get them anywhere else. Hi there. Super. Right. So I would like to say, I feel this has been an extremely special evening. I would like you to clap and to say goodbye, and thank you all very much for coming, and thank you to Peter Anna and Thomas for their entertainment and memorable words tonight. Thank you. Roger, you have something to say?
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Bye-bye.
Be a good teacher, but in reality, there is 100% overlap in terms of technology, product, and
Anna, did you arrive at your station? Because you said you were traveling.
Yes, I did. It's wonderful. I'm in a coastal town in Italy.
Oh, how lovely. Wow, that makes me so envious.
Milano Marittimo. Yes.
And Sarah, there you are. Is that you? That's lovely. I don't think I've ever seen you before. How nice to see you.
Thank you so much for organizing. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, my friends, I think that is it. And I'm incredibly pleased that we did this, and the video will be up on YouTube in a few days' time. But in the meantime, thank you all very, very much. And I will say good night. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Wonderful. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.